it is a combination of 6 compounding elements. So first of all, the renewed escalation of the war in the Black Sea, the renewal of the escalation of the war in the Middle East as well. Then we've got the various heat waves that are creating more impact in the EU. Then we had a WASDE report and a bit of a surprise reaction as it was very focused on yields only, followed by some Chinese buying of US soybean, and finally a focus once again on El Nino for the second part of the year. We had a reaction to the upside following the Novorossiysk hits yesterday, but the market, if we look at DEC 26 on Paris wheat, is still in a 230, 235 range, when recently we've had a high of 250.5. So yes, the market has rallied, but it has not yet made a new high. So it is very similar to the reaction that we've had in the past about the Iran conflict. The market is slightly desensitized to news, and there's a kind of fatigue to the elements of headlines. Now, when we look at the past 2-3 weeks, the Russians and the Ukrainians have been hitting each other's vessels to the point where vessel owners are reluctant to get to Ukrainian or Russian ports to put their crew and their properties at risk, which is quite sensible. And to the point also that the US have intervened to the Ukrainians by asking them to not hit any more vessels going into Russian ports. And the Ukrainians have agreed, but instead of hitting vessels, they've started to hit ports. So the situation logistically is still very difficult. So when we look at the port situation, the Russians over the past 2-3 weeks have hit ports in Ukraine. We can mention Odessa, Mykolaiv, Ismail, Pivdeni, Chornomorsk, for example. They've also hit some grain infrastructures in the eastern part of Ukraine. And when we look at the other side of the coin, the Ukrainians have hit the ports of Taman, Rostov and Novorossiysk in Russia. So Novorossiysk is the big one. It's the largest deep sea port in Russia. And we hear that it may take 1 month to 3 months to redo or rebuild the damage that has been caused over the past few days. So it is creating some logistical issues and concerns in the market overall. So in terms of direct consequences, it's the fact that grains and horses are not getting to ports. The Ukrainians and the Russians have halted operations, and some access to ports have been either reduced or stopped. So trucks or rail cars are not getting to ports. So that's the obvious direct impact. Then not being able to export means that it creates upstream issues, especially in terms of storage. The Ukrainians are telling us that they may need 11 million tons of storage because it doesn't get out by sea shipment in a sense, and they need to find alternatives. So if they don't have those warehouses, they need to find on-farm stockage availability, which could be done through bags, but they don't have those bags. So they've asked the US, for example, to provide some help in terms of getting those alternative storage capabilities. And the Russians are telling us the same. They are rediverting some of their flow either to other ports or through different rail routes. In terms of alternatives, generally speaking, it's what I've just mentioned in terms of finding different routes. So the Russians are looking at subsidizing rail services by some 10 billion rubles, and the Ukrainians are doing something similar. They're trying to find different routes, and they're looking at routes which have been very successful in the past or new routes. So the successful part is the route to the north, so trying to get the rail freight to go north through Poland. The war has been going on for 4 or 5 years now, so it is something that has been successful in the past, and therefore it's trying to revive this rail route. But we're being told by some of our participants that getting through the border can take up to 10 days. So it needs improvement, and the Ukrainians and the Poles have been talking about simplifying the process. Similarly, the Ukrainians have been talking to the Moldavians to try to create a new rail route through Moldavia, and Moldavia has offered to offer some 50% reduction on their rail freight. The obvious element is war risk and logistical issues, but there's also heat and drought issues. So both the Ukraine and Russia have had pockets of dryness affecting crops. To put an example, the Russians have put a agricultural emergency in the region of Omsk in Siberia, and the Ukrainians have been talking of extreme heat in some areas. On top of it, we hear that the freight costs have ballooned by 1.5 to 2.5 folds. We also hear that there's some concern about whether or not farmers may want to fully harvest or not, especially in Russia. When we consider that over the past 2-3 weeks, because no one wants to go to Ukraine or to Russia to get grains out of those countries because of the war risk, prices have absolutely plummeted because there's no current demand. So some farmers are questioning whether or not they should harvest because they think that prices are low. They think that they may not have the possibility to get crop to export, and with Russia having a fuel crisis because the Ukrainians have hit their refineries again and again and again, some fear that maybe some of the Russian wheat is going to be left in the field. And that's where the configuration changes a lot, because initially it's a logistical issue. So people are saying it's bullish short term, it could be bearish longer term once the logistical part comes back to normal. But then if it becomes a output issue, if farmers don't harvest, then it's very different and it could be bullish for the longer term. So that's what we're going to have to watch out for. Finally, also, the bit which is very crucial is the fact that the exports are greatly reduced. So up to the end of July, when we look at the figures that we got from Ukraine, those figures were actually ahead of what they were at the same time the previous season. And since the start of August, we're being told that they've fallen by about 75%. So when we look at the Russian figures as well, in July, the wheat exports were 1.6 to 1.9 million tons compared to 2.2 the previous month. And for August, the estimates are 2.5 to 3.5 million tons compared to 4.5 the prior year, which would be a 10-year low. So there's definitely a massive slowdown in August so far. On top of the Black Sea conflict, we still have in the background the Middle East conflict, which once again is coming to the forefront. And the past 2-3 weeks have been a mixture of hope to catastrophe. So on the one hand, it is providing support to the energy markets, which then provides spillover support to our grains and oilseed markets. So over the past 2-3 weeks, that has continued to be in the background. When we look at the news front, it's been a very mixed picture in terms of calling for war damage, calling for further escalation, further hits. Trump saying that it's either he hits Iran or it is decapitation. So some very strong language. And on the other side, it's a return to potentially diplomacy and potentially to an elusive deal. So it's again that difference between the strong words and then the potential for peace. So that's still been in the background, and that's been there for the past 2-3 weeks. On top of it, the conflict has expanded in the sense that the Israelis have hit southern Lebanon once again. Netanyahu has refuted a plan for Gaza that was presented by the US. Also, we've had the Iranians saying that if they continued to be hit, they would hit oil fields and infrastructures in neighboring countries. So there's the risk of escalation once again. And beyond that, we've had the Houthis in Yemen hitting some ships in the Red Sea, and to the point where even as far as Egypt, we had some impact with some drones hitting some vessels in one port. The consecutive heat waves are creating a logistical nightmare as well, in the sense that the fluvial transport is coming to almost a halt, especially when we consider the Rhine and the Danube river levels. When we look at the Rhine, one spot of the Rhine is only 23 centimeters deep. So if you put your wellies or your waders on, you can actually cross this mighty river. And when we look at the Danube itself, the river levels are a record low as well, to the point that some 200 ships that were sunk during World War II by the Germans are actually visible. So I invite our listeners to either Google it or look at some videos on YouTube. It's quite an interesting view. So what does it mean for grains and oilseed? It means that from a logistical point of view, wheat, maize, rapeseed shipments via barges are coming to a halt. It's either suspended or the loads are lightened to the point that it's not economically viable, and it's creating an absolute nightmare in terms of logistics. Then on top of it, the successive heat waves have continued to have some yield and production impacts. I'll start with maize. We've discussed it at length over the past few weeks, but we're getting more information and it's getting worse. So for example, in France, the crop conditions in maize are just 31% good to excellent. It's catastrophic. The production estimates are bad. They're 6.9 to 8.8 million tons compared to 13.7 last year. And when we look at the EU overall, the estimates are now 48 to 52 million tons. When we started the season, in a range of 59 to 63 million tons. So we've lost a lot of that production potential because of those consecutive heat waves. The direct consequence is an expectation of higher imports, and we're talking 24 to 25 million tons of maize imports required by EU now. Similarly in wheat, we've seen over the past 2-3 weeks a continued cut of those production estimates. So if we look at the EU overall, we've lost 2 to 4 million tons of production estimates over the past 2-3 weeks, with the range currently in 124 to 127 million tons for soft wheat. When we look at France specifically, we're talking below 32 million tons. This morning we had the German cooperative mentioning just over 19 million tons of wheat in Germany compared to 22.6 last year. So again, it shows that we've lost in production. And then when we look at rapeseed as well, the rapeseed yields could also be affected while some of that harvest still goes on. And one thing I forgot to mention on the wheat side, when we look at the exports so far, the exports are very slow. We're only exporting 1 million tons so far compared to about 2.4 million tons at the same time last year, simply because farmers are not certain of how much they are harvesting just yet, or they know that it's a lower crop and they don't want to sell because they expect higher prices. Moreover, if we look or turn to the UK, we've had some very alarming data as well. The UK has had its worst cereal crop since 1984, so since record began. And also we had a harvest that was the quickest and the fastest and the earliest since record began in 2006, and to the point where some agricultural bodies or some consumer bodies are saying that it could be having a massive impact on food inflation and potentially food shortages in the UK.